Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to Database 101, Improve Your Donor Database for Fundraising Success. And we are happy to have you joining us today and appreciate you taking time from your busy schedules. My name is Kimberly. I'm part of the QGIve team. And if you haven't had the opportunity to work with us before, we're an online fundraising platform dedicated to helping nonprofits raise more money. And part of how we do that is through webinars like this one. So today's webinar will be about 45 minutes with a Q&A to follow. So making our total time today just about an hour or so. We are recording the presentation, and we will be sending each of you a follow-up email tomorrow, which will have the recording, a copy of the presentation, as well as links to all the resources we discuss and a couple added extras. We are live tweeting today's webinar highlights. So for you Twitter users, we're at #QGiveWebinar. So please feel free to join the discussion. If you do have questions at any point during the presentation, please go ahead and pop them into the questions box. Our presenter and team are ready to answer and discuss these during our Q&A portion that follows the presentation. And after today's webinar, you will be prompted to take a short 4-question survey. So your feedback is crucial. We'd love to hear the feedback because it does help us determine future content for webinars and other resources that we develop throughout the year. So, before diving into today's presentation, I just want to take a quick peek at QGive's background, mission, and offerings. QGive has been helping nonprofit organizations implement and grow their online fundraising programs since 2007. And as the importance of online giving has grown, our mission has remained the same, and that is to help others fulfill their passion to help make a difference. And we do that through a comprehensive suite of fundraising tools featuring donation forms, event registration, peer-to-peer fundraising, text giving with outbound messaging, and auction events. And we value our relationships and are proud to connect our nonprofit friends to our partner network in hopes that this helps you increase your nonprofit's effectiveness and success. So today we are excited to introduce you to one of our partners, Marshall Partners, a consulting service specializing in data analysis to determine inefficiencies in workflow, identifying opportunities to improve return on investment, cost of raising a dollar, and community impact of philanthropic efforts. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our subject matter expert and speaker today, Tricia Marshall, founder and president of Marshall Partners. And as you will hear, she brings an enormous amount of experience in nonprofit donor database management and operation support. So over to you, Tricia.
I'm really excited to be with you all today. Thank you so much for joining and taking time out of your afternoon to chat all things data, data analytics, data coding, cleanup. I get really excited about data, so buckle up. You are in for a jam-packed 60 minutes of data overload. So first things first, let's cover our agenda. I will start by laying some of the groundwork, setting the stage for our current fundraising landscape, which you all, I'm sure, know very well. We will discuss why challenges within your donor database happen and some of those root sources of your data problems. We will then move into some tips for leveraging your donor data. And later in the session, I am going to be requesting for you to submit your real life database challenge for what I like to call my data challenge speed rounds. So we will fit as many of your real life examples into the session as possible. I will try to answer your questions and point you in the right direction of where you should look. We will then move into the processes and tools that you could implement right away. So hopefully you'll be able to take a couple of takeaways that you can work through as soon as you leave today's session. And we will close out with any remaining questions in the Q&A. So really excited. We've got a lot to cover today. So let's dive in. So I'm going to start with some key background. The most recent annual report on the philanthropy in America produced by Giving USA found that charitable giving totaled more than $471 billion in 2020. That's growing by 5% over 2019. And that's in spite of a lot of the fundraising challenges that the pandemic brought on. And with 69% of those funds coming directly from individuals. We saw an overall cumulative increase between 2018 and 2020 of 9.1%. That's huge. So according to a recent study conducted by AFP and the Center for Nonprofits, donations of less than $250 jumped to 9.2% in the first half of 2020, while those mid-level gifts between $250 and just under $1,000 increased by about 8%, and gifts of at least $1,000 and above increased by 6%. So I'm sharing that because those analytics really do apply to a lot of the data that we're going to be covering today, the database management tools. So I'm going to share a few more annual giving statistics with you, and these actually can be found on QGive's blog, Fundraising Statistics. So monthly donors give about 42% more in 1 year than one-time donors. I'm sure this isn't very surprising to you, but understanding how to use your data to engage those potential monthly donors is hopefully something that we will be able to walk away having a better understanding of today. And 60% of millennials donate on average just shy of $500 to nonprofits each year. So that will be the next generation coming through. And speaking of that, economists are projecting the largest generational transfer of wealth to occur in the coming years, as baby boomers are expected to transfer about 30 trillion in wealth to the younger generations. Now, no prior time in history has America had such a vast amount of wealth moved through the hands of the next generation. And this money will be distributed amongst their children, their grandchildren, and hopefully to their charities of choice. So now more than ever, nonprofits must really develop a robust strategy for how to engage them and how to secure and be part of that giving plan, whether that's through plan giving initiatives or whether that's through engaging donors through major giving programs. But those initiatives and those strategic plans really need to be in place to position organizations to be able to receive those assets from your loyal donors and your new donors. And again, that's where your data analysis comes into play, because data tells us that your long-term donors are more likely to make a planned gift. They're in fact about 50% more likely to make a gift to your organization if they have been involved in giving to you for about 20 years. And so understanding who those donors are and how you can get that information out of your system is important. So still, given all of this information, many nonprofit organizations are being asked to do more with fewer resources, which prompts us to look internally at our fundraising operations to see how we become more efficient with the resources that we have. And with rapidly changing technology, the need to be nimble to approach our donors, leveraging that donor data is more important now than ever before. So right now, although data is really key, 90% of nonprofits collect data, only about 5% are using that data in every decision they make. And it is my mission to help organizations, help more organizations be able to answer yes to that question of whether they use data in every decision they make. So from a fundraising and outreach perspective, understanding some of the causes of your data nightmares is really important. So some of the root causes of this, number one, database conversions. Moving data and records from one system to another can cause issues with database integrity. I have several clients, we work with clients across the United States and actually have clients in a couple of different countries. So across the US and internationally, we see this as a common issue in almost every database that we work with. Many of you who have legacy systems that were merged into new software systems, or you may have multiple different sources of where your data is coming from, whether that is an event software, spreadsheets, wherever that may lie. Sometimes those migrations and conversions can cause major issues. Inconsistencies in how your data was entered. So your database coding is really critical to that useful, clean data and really understanding the appropriate code and where your data should live and be tracked in order to be able to leverage that and pull that back out from a reporting standpoint. Employee turnover. When your long-term employees leave, especially those who have been within your database administrative position for many years, sometimes so too does that historical data entry knowledge. For those of you who have small shops, a lot of that knowledge, of course, is in the heads of whether it's our database administrator, our gift officers, whomever it may be. It can be challenging because you don't have the time to write down and document what your processes and procedures are. So when there's turnover in those positions, that can be very challenging. Missing the big picture. So sometimes the database coding is set up for those one-off events, the reports or initiatives. Sometimes coding is set up to be able to capture those sticky situations. Perhaps there was a donor who was upset about the way that we managed a mailing or their salutation. And so sometimes one-off codes are set up rather than really considering a long-term strategy. So anytime we're working with our clients, that's usually the first place that we start is by taking a look at what that overall strategic plan is for the organization, and then figuring out how the database can support each of the team members involved in the KPIs that will keep us on track for that, achieving those strategic plan goals. And then multiple platforms and system integration. So these systems are used to store your data. That could be from your peer-to-peer fundraising solutions, your event management tools, your communication platforms, and more. Those inconsistencies in where data is stored and how it's coded can cause challenges because you may not have one source of truth within your system. So your donor management system should be that one source of truth. And I think I have worked with, I have yet to find a client who doesn't have some sort of information stored without a platform in general. So whether that's in your spreadsheets and Word docs, in the heads of your employees, that is the most dangerous place that I say data and information is stored, because sometimes it just doesn't make it to be easily, when it's stored there, it's not easily reportable and you can't easily analyze it. So now that we've outlined what the causes and perhaps where some of those sources of your database challenges come into play, let's chat through the benefits of data, why and how you should leverage your data. So obviously you're all here today because you understand the importance of it, but just to drive that message home a bit more. So your fundraising and outreach, optimizing those fundraising efforts can have a major impact on a nonprofit's success. Your analytics can help identify fundraising prospects, provide insight into the most effective fundraising methods and most favorable target markets. Using your data, organizations can ensure that your campaigns are meeting your targets that will hopefully generate additional revenue efficiencies for your team members and help determine where to best allocate your resources. Improving your ROI and increase efficiency. Analytics can help nonprofits track your budgets and expenditures, plan for resource allocation, and forecast your future revenue. We have many nonprofit organizations that we work with where the foundation or advancement team may have different numbers reported than the finance team. And so we really try to help our clients gain consensus around that through leveraging and understanding your data, how it's tracked and how that compares to your fundraise or to your finance team. And then, of course, trust and accountability. Nonprofits often rely on very powerful anecdotal stories when sharing your mission and impact. And that is really important and a critical element. However, using data to complement those stories can communicate to your savvy donors the impact of their investment in the organization. And analytics can be a really powerful tool for generating reports, for gaining insight into trends at the organization. And nonprofit leadership teams can more effectively plan for the future when we are appropriately leveraging that information. So some of you may be saying, that's great, but I can't trust my data in its current stage, let alone begin to understand how to leverage it. So let's spend some time talking about that. Looking at a couple of key areas for how we might leverage your data. So investing in your database, auditing your database is something that is, I think it's a major project to take on, but it's extremely important to understand and get a baseline. So what I mean by that, we work with dozens of nonprofits and often find, as I've stated, donor data information is stored in many different locations. That's your spreadsheets, your event databases, your email software solutions, whether you're using Constant Contact or another solution, in addition to your peer-to-peer fundraising solutions, your email communications, and of course, in the heads of your fundraising officers. So it is extremely important to audit your system so that we can understand and map it out so that we can manage your data in one key area and be able to trust the information that's coming back out, that it's comprehensive. I'm sure everybody on this call has had the experience of your leadership team has asked for a report and then they come back and say, so-and-so is missing from here. Yes, but so-and-so may be missing because that information was never added to the system. So we can only work with the data that we have. And so it's really critical to ensure that we have some sort of centralized system and a structure in which that information is entered, along with the assignment of who will be in charge of getting it entered. So when we talk about standardizing your data entry, that data integrity is really key. If the data is not accurate, it cannot be trusted in the decision-making process. And there are horror stories after horror stories that my clients have shared where somebody was on a mailing that shouldn't be, deceased records have been mailed to, solicited. I've had clients who shared an example of somebody had given through the United Way, and unfortunately that information was never added to the record. So the gift officer was sitting down to meet with them and soliciting them for what they thought was their first major gift. Come to find out they had been a major gift donor for the last 5 years, and that information wasn't added to the system. So again, standardizing that data entry, making sure that we have clear coding and clear written procedures as to where that information is stored so that we can trust it, leverage it to be able to make better organizational decisions. Regular reporting. So performing that regular reporting, determining which statistics are important to your organization, and then setting those goals to benchmark each month. If you're new to tracking these types of items, it might be helpful to track new donors, lapsed donors, especially as we're coming to your year-end giving programs, or simply start with comparing appeals each year. Creating those standard metrics and then reporting on the progress to goal monthly. Again, it's really the practice of bringing data to the forefront and making sure that you are using that to inform your decision making. And then share your findings, celebrate those successes. According to the Nonprofit Trends Report, transparency and trust are still very much keys to success in your fundraising. So supplement your anecdotal mission-focused stories through your data to illustrate how donors have made an impact. These savvy donors want to make an investment within the organization and within the community. And I think investment is really the key operating word there. They are investing in you. They are trusting in you to use their funds wisely to make the biggest impact. And they want to be able to see that impact. So by sharing your findings, by using data to illustrate and complement your anecdotal stories, you can gain trust with your donors. And so perhaps you might consider how many people you've served, how many meals you were able to supply through contributions that have come in, the dollar value of volunteer hours. Tracking all of this type of data will help you build trust with your funders, with your donors, and hopefully ultimately impact your bottom line. So diving into the specifics here, considering your overall strategy, is really important when we're auditing your system. So in order to create a database infrastructure that is going to sustain you as well as grow with you, you really have to first think about the overall fundraising priorities and strategies for the organization. So I always ask my clients to schedule at least a 90-minute session with your key stakeholders to gain consensus around your 1-year and 3-year fundraising goals. And that should include your leadership team, but as well as the other members of your team, because it's often the other members, your database administrators, who are being tasked with supporting what those initiatives are. So whether that's if it's embarking on a campaign or switching your strategy for segmenting your donor database, it's important because your database administrator is the person that is pulling your mailing list, pulling your reports, hopefully pulling action reports for your prospect and major gift officers. So ensuring that they're involved in that conversation, first of all, gives them clarity on the direction of the organization, but also helps them understand what their role will be moving forward. So making sure that everybody is in alignment, is on the same page, having that conversation is really where it starts. And then it's important to audit your system. So what do I mean by this? It's most of my clients have information stored, and rarely do their systems talk or integrate with one another. So I find it really helpful with my clients to do a brain dump of all of the places that the information might be stored and actually mapping it out. So performing that audit of your data. So think things like your donor database, your event database, your spreadsheets, and I call those your shadow databases, your KPIs and dashboards. I have clients who store information in PowerPoints because that's how it gets reported out to leadership team. And that information gets updated manually. It opens up some room for error, and it's difficult from a transparency perspective. So really taking a look at calendars, how are you managing your volunteers? If you're a school, looking at your registrar, your registrations, your families, your schools. If you're a hospital or healthcare system, do you have grateful patient management, and is that integrated within your system? Your membership for organizations that have membership. So really taking a look at where is all of this information stored, and if there is information that's within spreadsheets or not within your main database or any of the other software solutions that you use, why is that the case? I always encourage clients to start to get curious as to, is there something wrong with our subscription level that we aren't able to track this information within our platform that's causing workarounds within the system? And when those workarounds are being done, I then like to take a look at, okay, what's the time that it takes to manage that information outside of the system from both a staff perspective, but also the delay in reporting and analytics. What aren't we able to get out of the system when it's coded in places that aren't within your donor system? And what's the value? Try to calculate the value of what your loss may be by your opportunity cost there. And so when we frame it in that way, and when we have, again, black and white, the data in front of us versus going to a supervisor and saying, I can't, this tool isn't working for me, I can't get it to work. When we have that concrete map and plan in place, and then we can show, here's a quote for the tool that I'm looking for, I think it could really help support getting those approved in the budgeting process, helping to illustrate how it can reduce your expenses, whether that's your time it takes to do something. It allows for efficiencies, and ultimately can get you working on the work that you do best, and that's hopefully raising funds. Next, it is important to talk about creating standardization within your system. So as we think about that, this is really the part that becomes overwhelming for my clients. So I always encourage them to start with the basics. Most CRMs allow for users to set required mandatory fields. These are fields that should always be entered. So think about your gift entry, think about new record creation. What fields and codes should always be used when you are creating those new records, making sure salutations and addressees, for example, get added. So that's going to be a really key piece to ensuring data integrity and consistency over time. So if you can create first start by reviewing and then creating what those mandatory fields are that will help reduce on some of the data cleanup that you need to do on the back end. When is the last time that you've reviewed your user rights, permissions, and your access? So this is really important for database security, but also a good way to set restrictions and prevent unintended errors within the system. We've had, my clients have had situations where gift officers unknowingly were creating new coding within the system, and it created a bit of a mess on the table code side and required quite a bit of cleanup and also impacted reporting. So I always recommend taking a look, reviewing your user groups, your rights and access. It's something that can usually be done pretty quickly and should be done regularly. I'd say at least quarterly. If you're at a large organization where you may have a turnover or new users joining, if you're at a smaller organization, every 6 months to a year would be ideal. Thinking of some other ways to standardize and speed up the process. Entering your gifts, for those of you who don't already do it, always through batch entry. That way you can set the required fields, create some consistency and standardization. Creating monthly health checks within your system. So this shouldn't be something that should require a ton of time for each of you, but health checks around your financial reconciliation or deceased records to make sure that any records who have been marked deceased in the past month have closed out any fields, uncheck this and mail to the addresses. Any address updates, constituent codes, just making sure that these key fields that you said is mandatory, that are required, you have somebody reviewing those monthly health checks for you. And then I say usually just try to write one standard operating procedure a month. And I usually recommend doing it as you're doing some sort of process. So just starting to get the process in place, creating some consistency around that. And the last tool that I will share here is creating a data request form. So this helps standardize the requests that are coming through and allows you to document what's been asked for historically. So this is particularly helpful when gift officers or leadership team members, annual giving officers are requesting data from your database administrator. Understanding, I know a lot of times for our clients anyway, the database administrator might have heard and received what they thought was going to be what was requested of them, and what had actually the gift officer was looking for was very different. And so that can create some back and forth and some inefficiencies. So we typically recommend standardizing that request form, standardizing what and how, understanding how the data is going to be used, because when the database administrator understands that a gift officer may be using this report to consider prospects, or maybe needing a list for your LIBUNs towards the end of the year, when you can understand the why behind the request, they may be able to make recommendations as to how the data could better be used and leveraged. And so it becomes then this partnership. Oftentimes we see that initially this request for data and then the providing of the data tends to be transactional amongst team members, when really it should be relational. We should be having a conversation about it. We should be talking about and asking questions to make sure that we are leveraging the data and leveraging the knowledge of both the gift officer as well as the database administrator, because the database administrators are in that system working every single day. And so when we can start to have those conversations, that's really when we can start to see the results of leveraging the information. Some of the most common data issues that we see are consistencies around tracking your gift entry. So your campaigns, funds, appeals, and package coding are really the 4 key codes that we see the most issues with. Your donor acknowledgement letter process, oftentimes those are done outside of the system because they are not set up correctly within the system. However, I know that tools like QGive have really great processes. Sometimes it just needs to be optimized. Some difficulty, one of the pain points that we often hear is difficulty comparing apples to apples. So when we come in to work with the organizations that we work with, we often recode gifts, at least over the course of the last 3 years, so that there's consistency in campaigns, funds, appeals, packages, so that we can compare apples to apples for your donors. And then another key pain point tends to be your prospect moves management and your prospect pipeline management. So that's where that regular analysis and reporting comes into play. So I have put a few different examples of types of monthly, annual KPI and goal and grant metrics that we typically recommend for our clients. So again, start with the basics. If this is not something that your team regularly does, pick one and stick to that, create consistency, because when you can wrap your brain around one of them, and when you can perform a process that works and solidify a process that works for your organization, it gets easier to roll it out each year. And then, as we discussed, make sure you're sharing those results. So share it within your annual reports, share your impact by combining your anecdotal stories with that data, communicate the impact of your donors' investment in your missions, and let them know, reach out to them, because it will help grow the relationship when you have that transparency of data. And when you're able to get down to that, we worked with, I sit on boards, and sometimes when I ask the question of, can you tell me roughly the impact of the gift, that can be off-putting if we don't have an answer to that question. So really understanding what those data metrics are behind that is really critical and important. So now that we've done that review, I'd like to open it up to the data challenge speed rounds. So please submit your examples, your data challenges that you'd like us to work, or you'd like me to work down through.
While folks are thinking about their questions and perhaps typing them, we did have a couple folks that submitted a few ahead of time. So we'll just kind of start with those and see if they kind of prompt everyone to go. We had a question that says, we are over on our record count and we are charged per record. I'm being pressured to delete old records within my database that include gift history, but haven't given in a long time. What's the best practice here? When should records be deleted?
That is a really good question, and one that we often work down through. So I would never recommend deleting any records that have giving history associated with them. Instead, I may mark them for possible future deletion, but would ensure that we have a strategy around reaching out to those donors. So I would do some outreach, whether that's any mailings, if we want to pick up the phone and call. And if the organization decides that after a certain period of time, they're not going to give to us, they've moved on, or we've failed to engage them, then I would recommend that those records with the giving history be marked as inactive. So inactivating those records, because if a donor were to come back around again in 8 years and you've deleted them and it appears that they're a brand new donor, however, there's been a historical interaction with the organization that could do more damage to the relationship. And then in terms of deleting records, when I would recommend that is if we've come across databases where there have just been massive imports for prospects. Perhaps these folks are never going to give, they were never truly engaging with the organization to begin with. It's just caused a massive increase in uptick in your record count. If there's no interaction, if they have not engaged with you in any way, they've not attended events, they've not volunteered, they've not sat on any committees, and they've not made a single gift to the organization, then you could probably delete those records. You could export them out, keep a separate spreadsheet. Rarely do I recommend having a separate spreadsheet, but in this event, you may choose to export that out just so you know where they came from and why they were deleted. And either way, I would recommend creating a document that's just outlining what your process is and why you've made the choice to inactivate or delete a record.
Fabulous answer, and you got some folks thinking. So Peter is asking, we are merging systems and have run in duplicate entries. Is there an efficient way to manage and merge these duplicate donor entries?
There is, Peter, and that is often a challenge when you're merging systems. So I'm not sure which system you're using to merge, but there is usually within systems, there is a tool that could potentially be purchased to help speed up that merge process so that you don't have to do every single one manually. So again, I'm not sure which system you're using. Feel free to shoot me an email after, and I could get a little bit more specific, but broadly speaking, I would say check with the tool that you're using, the software solution, to see if there might be a bulk way that you could do that. There typically is.
And then Jennifer is saying, would you recommend hiring a consultant to go into our CRM and revise last 3 years to make fields consistent? I'm hesitant to take on such a large process or project and accidentally mess up our system.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So that is often what we end up doing with our clients. So for me, the best approach would be a partnership there, right? So the consultant can't come in and just start making those changes, because you're the one that knows the organization, you know your donors, you know perhaps why some of the decisions were made. So I do recommend working with a consultant because they are the experts in the database management, but you're the expert on the organization. So anybody that you're working with, you need to work cohesively together, and they need to be decisions. It's not a one size fits all, because each organization has unique initiatives that you need to be able to continue to work through and support. And so work with someone that's going to be a true partner and ask those types of questions of you. And you should ask that of whomever you'd be considering. I also find for our clients, so we outsource, some of our clients do outsource that cleanup to us and my team. I've got a team of 7. And so we often work through those projects, and we usually will do an assessment. We gain the information, make those decisions, and then start working down through the cleanup. Because you have so much on your plate, it's often better ROI for you to partner with somebody so that you can focus on raising the funds at your organization and let somebody else handle some of that cleanup for you. And it can usually be done a lot quicker.
Tammy is asking, how often do you recommend doing an NCOA per year? And for the I've seen some chat with some of the acronyms that people aren't 100% sure. So if you want to explain what that is to everyone as well, just to make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah, thank you. And I apologize that I was using some of those acronyms I did see in the chat function. So thanks for those of you who jumped in to explain some of the acronyms that I was using. And COA is National Change of Address. That varies for each organization. No more than quarterly. I would say I wouldn't do it more than quarterly. And I typically like to review it, because sometimes that comes back and it's grabbed the wrong person, it's mapped the wrong person. So I'm always cautious. I always review those files before I put them back into the database.
And it's clear that Tammy uses that database, but there might be some folks that don't know about it. So do you want to kind of maybe elaborate a little bit on it in case it's new to some folks?
NCOA can be run depending on the database solution that you use. Sometimes it's offered within those solutions that can be run it's an address lookup, an address check. For those of you who don't have that as part of your database system, you can ask your mail house. When you're working with a mail house who is producing your annual appeals and sending out your mailings, you can ask them to run your list through the National Change of Address database. They'll get a report back to tell you which records, which donors on your list have moved, where there may be some address challenges, and then you can then update your record and make decisions to not mail to them. So that should hopefully reduce the cost of your mailing. Also, make sure that any list that you're sending to the mail house, it contains your record ID on there. So your unique constituent ID, your record ID, your donor profile ID, whatever the phrase and terminology is within the system that you use, because oftentimes then that file, once you clean it up, could then be imported back into your database, causing you to make that process a bit more efficient so it doesn't have to be done manually each time.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's helped quite a few people from some of the comments. Lisa has said, what is your basic recommendation to recording, entry, tracking of initial corporate leads when they are still in the prospecting phase and have not donated or sponsored yet?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite projects, Lisa. We love working on your prospect management pipelines. So I typically actually look at the entire structure and the process at your organization. So how many gift officers do you have? Who do you have assigned portfolios? And it sounds like you probably do based on your corporate lead and the way that you've phrased your question there. So taking a look at your process, and then we build out your database infrastructure to code and set up your prospect statuses. So what phase they might be in. I always recommend if you do have a lead and somebody that you are actively working with that's within your portfolio to go through that qualifying phase, that we're coding them as such. And so we have set standard operating procedures and rules around how long somebody could be in the qualifying phase while they're in a gift officer's portfolio before they need to be moved to the next phase. There's usually some metrics around that, but we love setting up those dashboards for the gift officers and helping you see how to move it through the pipeline. So usually it's, I would recommend coding them within your system, and it's usually a status of qualification in there as you're working through that process. They can be changed to solicitation once you have qualified them and prepared a solicitation for them. And then once they actually make a contribution, they may move into stewardship or the next solicitation if you have another ask following on the heels of their first gift.
Hey, well, Madison is saying, I work for an organization that does not yet have a data position. The responsibility is typically split between multiple positions, which creates inconsistent donor records. We are hoping to create a better updated information for our donors. Where do we begin on such a large project?
So I would start with a couple of key pieces. Number one, creating consistency and agreement around your data entry. So starting with your gift entry and your new record creation, and making the fields within your database mandatory. So setting up, I mentioned the batch entry for gift entry, making sure that you have templates. So by batching your gifts, and that means entering it onto a batch rather than individually on every single donor record, by creating those templates, you can copy the template each time you're entering a new batch. That creates consistency in the fields that are entered. When you create those mandatory fields, that's requiring you cannot save that gift record until those fields are completed. And so that again helps from creating those consistencies. And then your new record creation or your address changes, also putting some standardization around that, making those fields required. Madison, you might also consider, rather than having multiple folks within the organization do it, you can outsource some of that. So I know there's firms, my firm outsources data entry and gift entry for our clients. So we take that on, that way it's done consistently for you, especially for those organizations who don't have a data person yet, or have maybe had transition in that. So having that consistency and having somebody that is specializing in this, because that's the other piece of it, right? I mean, if you have 3 different people or 4 different people who are entering that, that's not their primary role. And it may not be necessarily their specialty. It's just something that they have to get done because it has to get done at the organization. And so if you can outsource it, sometimes that allows you to, it optimizes the entry. You've got an expert doing it versus multiple team members. If that's not an option for you and it must stick within your team, then setting up some of those required and mandatory fields is really important.
Thank you. Thank you. So Dan has shared that he uses QGIve and Salesforce. So thank you, Dan. But how often do you advise them to upload donors to Salesforce?
Regularly. Yeah. So I don't know what your fundraising looks like, but I would say if you have information coming in daily, weekly from QGIve, that information should be going into Salesforce, because your Salesforce likely is your one source of truth. And so that information needs to be in there and accurate in order for your reports that are being pulled to be accurate, for anybody going in to take a look and have those conversations with donors, especially your major donors. Again, I just think about the example that I had shared with my client who was meeting with a donor who they thought had never given to the organization, and turned out they were a major donor. So making sure that information is in there is really critical.
Okay. Anne has asked, what is the best way to measure donor retention? Is it a 1-year lapse? The term confuses me. I would love to hear your insight.
So that is a little bit up to the organization, that really up to the ideal of the organization, the goals that are set within your organization. I will say, however, when we're looking at your retention, I do recommend looking at 1 year, because that's where we want to, whether that's your fiscal year or whether your calendar year, I recommend looking at that as a calendar year, because most donors identify with calendar year giving. Most donors don't really identify with what your fiscal year might be. So by taking a look at donors who gave between January 1st and December 31st, understanding of those donors who gave last year, who has not yet given this year, those are your potential donors at risk for lapsing. They are the low-hanging fruit. So on the sales side of things, the best customer is an existing customer, right? So it's a lot more expensive to go out and figure out how to acquire new donors or new customers than it is to maintain your current ones. I think the other piece of it, though, that is interesting is acquisition. So the way that I would define acquisition for your donors. So retention is one measurement, but acquisition is the other. Taking a look at how many new donors have given this year over last year. So brand new, and I would define acquisition as either donors who have given for the first time to your organization ever, or donors who have made their first gift for the first time in 5 years. So they have not given in 5 years, they just came back. I would consider them a new acquisition as well. So as you're looking at retention, it's those donors at risk of lapsing. So the donors who have given this year compared to those who have given last year. And then from your acquisition standpoint, those brand new donors to your organization, or the donors who have given for the first time in 5 years.
Thank you. Very thorough answer. Karen has asked, alternative CRMs to Salesforce specific to nonprofits. And I know that we have a couple partners that we can absolutely suggest, but I know she'd love to hear your opinion as well.
Yeah, so very much depends on the size of your organization and the budget of your organization. So, and if this is specific to donor management, and if this is specific to just donor management and not event fundraising solutions. So if we're talking just donor management, I would say Donor Perfect is a really good tool if you, again, depending on the size of your organization, or of course, Razor's Edge. I know that they have been going through some challenges recently, but from a system platform being able to do it, it's a very robust tool. So I'd still have to recommend Razor's Edge as well.
And we love them, and we also throw a Bloomerang in the mix.
Yep,
we work with them as well. Yeah.
Bloomerang's a good tool as well. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so Michael is asked, could you go over the data request form again?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So the data request form is something that creates some consistency amongst how lists are requested or submitted for requests to the database administrator. So questions on that might include, what's the overall purpose of the list request? How is it going to be used? Of course, what's the time frame? So many of the clients that I work with, it's I need this list and I needed it yesterday, right? But in order for the data analysis to happen, you got to have a little bit of time to be able to pull it, to think through it. Are there specific constituencies who must be included? Are we mailing to parents, to alums? Are we do we need to make sure all board members are included, for example, regardless of whether they've given or not? So who are those key folks that need to be included? And if you have those constituency codes, I actually recommend putting them on the form. That way people can check them off. From a giving perspective, are there any funds that should be eliminated or shouldn't be used? Are there gift types? For example, should gift in kind be used? Should it not be included? Are there specific appeals or solicitations that should or should not be included? What are some of those parameters around it? So really, making sure that you are spelling out every single piece of a request that you typically would work through as a database administrator. Should soft credits be included? Are there solicit codes, meaning has anybody been marked in the system as should not receive mail or do not solicit, that we need to be aware of? And so standardizing what the requests are so that you have that information on the forefront helps to reduce frustrations for everybody involved, but gives you a clearer picture at the onset of what the list poll might look like, the time that's going to be required for it. And it gives you some breathing space to allow you to start to question it, because when you see it written down, then you can say, okay, I see that you're using this list to consider and develop your prospect portfolio. So I see that you've included folks who have given a one-time gift of $5,000. Have you considered looking for folks who have actually given cumulatively over the course of the year? Because you may be missing your monthly donors who are making one-time payments that total up to the $5,000. So the hope is that those types of conversations could happen amongst the team members by having that request form standardized.
Okay. And then Jennifer has asked, do you recommend tracking volunteers in CRM? We have a CRM and a volunteer management system, but when we send out printed communications, it is such a process to merge distribution lists.
Again, this would be a little bit dependent on the organization. So I'm giving very broad and general answers without understanding the nuances to the specific organization. So please take what I say with that in mind. And if your volunteers are a significant part of your day-to-day operations, if what you do could not be done without them, I would recommend having your volunteers within your database, because oftentimes your volunteers who are giving of their time regularly could be your donors and could also be good plan giving prospects, because they may not have the capacity to give financially right now, but they are clearly very involved and engaged in your organization, and there could be a planned gift sometime in the future. Their volunteerism is a really good indication of that. So yes, I would recommend having them within your CRM.
So our speed round ended up being quite a few Q&A, but we did get through them, and we have about 7 minutes left for other things you wanted to cover.
Yep. So I am going to close with the tools to use right away. So we've talked, and I think we really touched on it during the speed round, the user groups and mandatory fields. User groups is you can usually define a group within the database. So you can create a marketing group. So everybody that belongs to the marketing group has specific permissions within your database. You can create a volunteer group. So perhaps they don't have the ability to go in and see giving histories for your donors. It may not be appropriate for them to have that information. So number one, take a look at your user groups and mandatory fields within your system. Number two, you can implement that data request form, or at least create a data request form right away. Number three, that batch entry, conditional mail merges. So sometimes clients that we work with have multiple different letters, donor letters, that they like to share with their donors. That's your donor acknowledgement letters that go out. Creating and setting up your conditional mail merges can help make your donor acknowledgement letter process much more efficient. Number four, your data roadmap. That's what I was talking about, doing an analysis and audit of all of the systems that you use, information that is stored in multiple places outside of your donor database, and see who's responsible for tracking that information, just outlining it so you have an understanding of where some of the gaps are in your fundraising data. Getting it out there and understanding where it is can start to give you a general sense of what needs to happen for cleanup. And then from a reporting standpoint, your LIBUNT report, take a look at donors who gave last year but have not yet given this year. So LIBUNT, for those of you who aren't aware, last year, but unfortunately not this year, is what LIBUNT stands for. Given that it's year end, it's not too late to take a strategic approach to re-engage those donors. So that is the 5 tools that I recommend implementing right away. Thank you so much for your time today. I have my contact information here on the screen, so please keep in touch. Feel free to reach out. And Kim, I'm going to pass it back over to you for any final questions and closeout.
So absolutely, if there are, it looks like there may be a handful. We do have a couple minutes. If there are additional questions, you can pop them into the Q&A. I know that it seems like there might be some questions about the QGIve integrations, and we do integrate with quite a few different CRMs. I know Brendan put that in the chat, so I don't know if that's helping everyone with that question. So anything else? Anyone else want to drop a question in? But you know, it doesn't matter if you think of a question later, because I have a great surprise for you. So when we send out the recording, one of the things that we are including is a link to Trisha and emailing her, because she is going to offer a free 45-minute consultation for everyone that registered. So for those of you that maybe were shy, didn't get your questions in there, or maybe have some follow-ups to things we covered, please look for the follow-up email that comes out tomorrow and that link. And I know Trisha did a fabulous blog with some additional things to think about that we published, and so we're going to include that. So thank you, Trisha, for sharing all this great information. Thank you, everyone, for attending and participating. So please be on the lookout. Again, if you do want to get hold of Trisha, the information's here, but again, this is all going to be sent to you tomorrow as well. If you did have questions that came up that you'd like to talk to QGIve about, like some of the integrations that we have, certainly reach out to our team. As you dial out, please don't forget the survey. And we really do hope that everything we covered today really does help you with your database and get ready for 2022. So thanks again. We appreciate you, and we will be in touch. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks again.